enjoy this sweater. I'm so happy that it's Christmas time. I'm like insanely happy. And I used to be very miserable around Christmas. I'm talking like suicidally miserable. I have deep empathy and sympathy for anybody else who suffers around the holidays. It's very deeply understandable given a lot of the pain that so many of us have felt in our families and religious upbringings. And because I have such a joyful experience now of Christmas and funnily enough, of all the symbols and music associated with Christianity, I just wanted to share this with you because I think you might find it beneficial, the perspective that I have found. And I have arrived at this perspective through a whole lot of reading Crowley and Jung and leading a mystery school and meditating a lot and doing a lot of weird magic. So there's a goodly amount of this that is, I guess, my own personal gnosis that I'm trying to transmit. And also a lot of it that I feel like is a cultural inheritance that is ripe, that is becoming ripe as we are now, Pluto has moved into Aquarius. We are in the age of Aquarius. We are firmly in the new Aeon. People have different dates for when they think that the new Aeon or the age of Aquarius starts. I think we are in still somewhat of a bit of a transitional time because the precession of the equinoxes is not yet completely in Aquarius. We were certainly in a very Aquarian time right now. Um, and let's see, maybe before I ramble too much further, I am going to share my screen with you. Yes, Mihaela, there will be a recording. And let's just get talking about it because we got a lot to talk about, everybody. So I want to lay some background for you, give you some foundation, some context for all the far out stuff I'm saying. And then I want to do a meditation today and really just get in touch with the joy and the grace. So here we are, the crowned and conquering child, a very merry new Aeon Christmas. And I have a fun little quote here from Carl Jung in Aeon, not Lion, autocorrect. In Aeon, it's okay, all right, fine, computer. Don't believe me that Aeon is a word. Um, Said more and more people begin looking around for exotic ideas in the hope of finding a substitute, speaking of some sort of substitute for the mythic understanding of the unconscious, as transmitted in Christianity. He says this hope is delusory, for though the Indian symbols formulate the unconscious just as well as the Christian ones do, they each exemplify their own spiritual past. So, of course, he's addressing an audience of European people and people of European descent. So the Indian teachings constitute the essence of several thousand years of experience of Indian life. Though we can learn a lot from Indian thought, it can never express the past that is stored up within us. The premise we start from is and remains Christianity, which covers anything from 11 to 19 centuries of Christian life, or European life, is I believe what the quote says. Anyone who believes he can simply take over Eastern forms of thought is uprooting himself, for they do not express our Western past, but remain bloodless intellectual concepts that strike no chord in our inmost being. We are rooted in Christian soil. And by that, I don't think he meant specifically the land of Europe. By Christian soil, I believe he meant the Christian unconscious. And I bring this up because obviously a lot of us have felt very alienated from Christianity, whether we were raised in it and very hurt by it, or we were raised in secular homes or something else. But I just think that Carl Jung is on to something here, which is that if we have, if we're in an Anglophone country, if we grew up in modern secular world that's been highly influenced by Christianity, we still have to deal with the legacy of Christianity and all of these symbols and this story and this inheritance. It doesn't just go away. I know many people who have, had a Christian upbringing and then they've gone deep into yoga or Buddhism or neo-pagan stuff. And Carl Jung was certainly very familiar with all of that. But there's still something that's left unhandled. I don't think we've adequately met with the inheritance of Christianity. So I'm very interested in that. Let's keep moving. I'm going to talk about a lot of far out stuff. I'm going to give you some pretty heavy quotes, but I really want to make sure you don't miss the distilled essence of what I'm saying. So here's what I have. I'm calling it the New Aeon Good News. This is the gospel according to Promethea. Promethea is me. That's my magical name. So this is the essence of what I want to transmit to you today, and I have various quotes and ideas to support the transmission of this, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it just to get it out there. You are the crowned and conquering child. You are always, already infinitely innocent, completely redeemed, loved, forgiven, delighted in, and utterly blessed. The Word of God, i.e., in this case, the incarnation, teaching, and miracles, death, resurrection, and Pentecost of Jesus, exists as a potent distillation of all mystery traditions, certainly all the mystery traditions of the Mediterranean and the Near East. Jesus's life made public what was previously secret to the Babylonian, Egyptian, Greek mystery schools. It's a mirror for you to look into and realize your own wholeness, your own love, miraculous power, and immortal radiance. So mirror, concept of mirror, that's very important today. There is absolutely nothing that you have to do or even that you can do to earn this. This is a free gift. It's what conventional Christians disdainfully call greasy grace because it requires absolutely zip zero nothing of you. You receive this rich, buttery grace entirely without condition. It's not dependent on you behaving ethically, on doing spiritual disciplines, looking good on Instagram, following a diet, having faith, repenting, believing, or absolutely anything else. And I mentioned that stuff about looking good on Instagram because I notice a lot of us, I think we have a consciousness, what early Christians would have called a sin consciousness. But it's not like we're so afraid of offending God. It's like we're afraid of not performing enough for our fellow humans. That's the way that it tends to manifest these days. And that's so if you ever find yourself feeling tremendously guilty that your post didn't get enough likes, or you don't have enough cool outfits, or you're not whatever enough, that's the same thing. So you don't have to do any of that. You've already been given everything. Time is non-linear. All of the universe has already been completely healed and redeemed in the infinite harmonic complexity of the alpha omega point, which is both the ever-present origin and the ultimate telos, or goal, to which we are all evolution, all happenings are hurtling towards, even though it doesn't look like it to our mortal perception, which tends to be rather linear. And in linear time, boy, things look really messed up. Okay. Your humanity is included in the Trinity, which we can express as Babalon, Beast, and Baby Jesus, and you are loved as Baby Jesus is loved. You are within the Trinity. You are not outside of it in any way. The Creator slash Christ, Yod He Vav He slash Yeshua, is whole and died for his own sins, which happen also to be ours because we are made in the image of the Creator, because as above, so below, that's a Hermetic truth, that's just fact. And we are also whole creators who contain both good and evil, consciousness and unconsciousness, creativeness and destructiveness. So we can talk more about the crucifixion and resurrection, but anyways, this is just the objective truth. The invitation is simply to relax into it and to enjoy it. And by the way, by objective truth, I mean that this is the objective truth expressed within this symbol set that I'm using, Christian symbol set. I want to put a big Christian Thelemic symbol set. I want to put a bracket on everything. I'm truly not one of those people who believes that there's only one way towards God or love. There's a million different ways. But I agree with Carl Jung that this symbol set needs to be reckoned with and interacted with for the evolution of our consciousness. So anyways, I'm using this symbol set, and if you don't like it, you are absolutely free not to, and I think that's completely great. But I like it a whole lot, so I'm just going to keep speaking in it. All right, here I go. The invitation is to simply relax and enjoy it. That's all. That's just an invitation. You don't even have to do that. You could completely ignore what I'm saying. That's also completely great. But if you want to, you can enjoy it. And as you deepen in awareness that innocence is infinite, as you relax into it and become drunk on it, because that also is the invitation here, is to become absolutely drunk, intoxicated with joy on an ongoing basis. As you do that, you spontaneously find yourself growing in fearlessness and virtue, discovering that your heart is light as a feather, that it is balanced on the scales of Mot. And you experience miracles of healing, prophecy, bounty, and creativity. So that is the good news. This is very good news, everybody. I don't know. And so I'm sharing it with you today, and I just love talking about it. I love reflecting about it. Oh, there's my little picture of crowned and conquering child, baby Jesus. Isn't that fun? And where did I write some notes? Oh, this is, I'm just going to address this really quickly. What if you don't feel any of that? What if, you've been hearing from Rumi quotes or lots of stuff over the years that you're loved and God is love and blah, blah, blah. Who the fuck cares? It doesn't seem meaningful. What if you don't really feel that? What can redemption possibly mean if no one feels redeemed? Was the way that Carl Jung asked that question in Aeon. And I would say a few things, which is probably you've never heard a total message of grace. What I just gave you is a complete message of grace. It's very likely that most of you have never heard that. Because both in conventional religions and in most magic circles, what you hear is a message of works. And I've taught this for many years. I taught a message of works. Do this, do that, do this other thing. Lists of things that you have to do in order to earn good stuff. And it seems to be that the human mind just naturally, sort of intuitively believes in earning because that's how things seem to work in the natural realm. But what we're talking about here is supernatural grace. And if you give yourself time to just soak in and relax into the message of grace, as we will be doing today, which I also think of as the message of Babalon, you probably will start to feel crowned and conquering. So that's my little caveat for that there. And let's talk about Aeons for anybody who's never heard this term new Aeon before. Probably many of you have if you've been on my list for a while, but this was an idea that Crowley had, and there's many different versions of this, but basically the idea is three primary Aeons. The first was the Aeon of Isis, characterized by pagan worship of Mother and Nature. Then there was the Aeon of Osiris, dominated by the paternal principle and what Crowley called the formula of the dying god, characterized by this idea of self-sacrifice and of submission to a father god, which often came to be phrased as submission to some sort of external authority or institution, a priesthood, a church, a government. So Crowley equated all of that with this glorification of suffering and this sort of dualistic spirituality that tried to disdain or ignore material life. And I think that that's definitely, we see that dualism manifest throughout the history of Christianity. And he says, he liked to say they worship death, glorify suffering, and deify corpses. Crowley was pretty mad about Christianity. He had been raised in a really zero fun, fundamentalist Christian sect called the Plymouth Brethren, and he didn't like it. So Crowley said, this modern Aeon is the Aeon of Horus, and with our times of self-realization as well as a growing interest in all things spiritual, it's considered to be dominated by the principle of the child. The word of its law is thelema, which is complemented by agape love. Agape happens to be the formula of Christ. And the formula of this Aeon, according to Crowley, is abrahadabra. That's a whole other discussion. Individuality and finding the true will are the dominant aspects. Its formula is that of growth in consciousness and love towards self-realization. So as we talked about in the emails leading up to this event, I really agree with Crowley that we are in a new Aeon. Carl Jung thought that we were too. And And that this new Aeon is about the child in the sense of the union of the feminine and the masculine, the conscious and the unconscious, the union of all opposites, really, which we'll get into talking about, the human and the animal, the spiritual and the material. This is an age of realization of profound union and of getting away from what actually is a heresy. Dualism is a weird, fucked up heresy that can make people very, very miserable. So an end to this terrible heresy and a realization of this deep non-dual truth, which brings joy. And the thing is that, you know, when Crowley would talk about the crowned and conquering child, here's the beautiful image from his Thoth tarot deck. The sun represents these, you know, crowned and conquering children at play. I would just always think of baby Jesus. I mean, how is baby Jesus not the crowned and conquering child? He just flippin' is. And anyways, but I do think that Crowley was right in that the way that Christianity has been taught and run for many centuries is whack, and we need a different relationship to the story of the incarnation and the story of the crowned and conquering child, the king and God and sacrifice. Something that Crowley was really into was talking about Babalon and the beast. So again, Crowley had been raised, like I said, in this very apocalyptic fundamentalist Christian cult that was obsessed with the book of Revelation. And Crowley pretty much knew the New Testament by heart. And anyways, there's a lot that could be said about Crowley and Babalon. But actually, oh, first I want to bring, where is that Jung quote? Sorry. I didn't super organize this very well. I was just like, everything that I have to say about everything. Before we talk about Babalon, let's talk a little bit about consciousness. All consciousness is recognition, recognizing, remembering. And here's a quote from Jung: "Whoever looks into the mirror of the water will see first of all his own face." And by the water, he meant the unconscious. "Whoever goes to himself risks a confrontation with himself. The mirror does not flatter, it faithfully shows whatever looks into it, namely the face we never show to the world because we cover it with a persona, the mask of the actor. But the mirror lies behind the mask and shows the true face." So I find this quote very interesting, very beautiful. And he's talking about nighttime dreams. So for Jung, nighttime dreams and myths are the two primary mirrors of the self that we can look into. So I don't know all of your individual nighttime dreams. That would take a lot of work to know all of that and interpret all of that. But we do have this collective myth that we can all look together into as a mirror. And that's what I want to do today. That's the invitation. I know I had a giant Jung quote. Aha, here it is. Okay. This is from one of Carl Jung's final essays called Late Thoughts, which he's published in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. And it's a long-ass quote, and I'm going to read all of it because it is very important. So here he's talking about the need for symbols and our relationship to symbols. And he's talking about the purpose of humanity as he understands it in our current age. Because Jung was very troubled, he saw that people were psychologically disturbed because they seemed to lack a sense of purpose. And boy, is that true. We have the highest rates of anxiety, depression, suicide, drug addiction ever. So I feel it's very imperative, along with Jung, that we find a new anchor for our sense of meaning. So here we go. Talking about symbols. It is a fact that symbols, by their very nature, can so unite the opposites. Let me try to make this bigger for you. Can I make this bigger? Because it's kind of small. Zoom in. That's the best I can do right now, I think. It is a fact that symbols, by their very nature, can so unite the opposites that these no longer diverge or clash, but mutually supplement one another and give meaningful shape to life. Once that has been experienced, the ambivalence in the image of a nature god or a creator god ceases to present difficulties. So he's talking here about how for thousands of years, the image of God in Christianity has been split, right? There's this all good Christ, And then there's this all bad devil. Oh, that devil. Whoa, he is bad. He does all sorts of bad stuff all the time. And then there's this perfect Christ. And it's schizophrenic. It's a weird schizophrenic idea of God. And in the Old Testament, of course, God isn't all good. God does all sorts of nasty things. God says, here's a bunch of laws, thou shalt not kill, but definitely go kill all these people. Oh, somebody's bothering you? I'll kill him for you. Like God's all over the place in the Old Testament. He 1000% matches the criteria for some sort of narcissistic, psychopathic, schizophrenic personality disorder. He's deeply troubled. And Jung makes the argument in his book, Answer to Job, that actually the best way to read the Old Testament, and I agree with him, and I don't think that this information has been integrated enough at all into our culture, but it's a huge realization. The best way to read the Old Testament is as a story of an unconscious God beginning to become conscious by being repeatedly confronted by people who are in dialogue with him and being like, what the fuck, man? WTF, what are you doing? And that's what Job does. You know, God is torturing Job, and Job is like, "Hey, this doesn't seem very righteous, my dude. Why are you doing this?" And Yod-Heh Vav-Heh starts to have a deep reflective process about like, what am I doing here? Why am I doing this? And then Jung says, well, so then Yod-Heh Vav-Heh decides to incarnate as a human being and suffer the pain of his own creation. Obviously, the pain, the joy, and the beauty of it. And we can talk more about that in a minute, but that's what Jung is talking about here, about how trying to resolve this weird schizophrenic perception of God in the Western mind, which splits God into all good and all evil. So Jung thinks that this can actually be healed by the Christian myth of incarnation. So he says, on the contrary, the myth of the necessary incarnation of God, the essence of the Christian message, the essence of Christmas, can then be understood as man's creative confrontation with the opposites and their synthesis in the self, the wholeness of this personality. The unavoidable internal contradictions in the image of a creator God can be reconciled in the unity and wholeness of the self as the conjunctio oppositorum of the alchemists, or as a unio mystica. In the experiences of the self, it is no longer the opposites, God and man, that are reconciled as it was before, but rather the opposites within the God image itself. So right here, Jung is pointing to the way that if we really ponder the story of the incarnation, the idea that one human being was the creator God, that the creator, force of nature, Yod-Heh Vav-Heh is a synonym for the creative natural process in the Kabbalah. Yod-Heh Vav-Heh, the whole creative process of nature, the beast, nature red in tooth and claw, this primordial, creative, orgasmic, fucking killing urge became a person, one person, within a really intense context of prophecy, actually, right? There was all sorts of prophecy that Jesus fulfilled. That's a far out story. And if you take that story really seriously, it can, Jung is saying, produce a reflection for you by which you can begin to understand the totality of your own self and understand that there's many opposites being united here. So it's not just the opposite of, God creator and one little man. It's also the opposites of good and evil are actually reconciled if we really take the idea of the incarnation seriously, which institutional Christianity for 2,000 years has, again, been guilty of the heresy of dualism. Because the idea, the essence of the essence of Christianity is supposed to be incarnation. God became man. But the way that conventional Christianity has made that into a dualistic heresy is that they insisted, no, 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 Jesus was without sin. If you say that Jesus was without sin, but every other human on earth sins, that means that Jesus is not human. And in fact, I've read the New Testament many times. I've read the Gospels many times. It seems like Jesus was a great guy, but that he definitely was a sinner, like all the rest of us. I mean, he wasn't an evil serial killer, but, he was rude to his mom. He broke the Sabbath laws. He seemed to like to party and hang out with prostitutes and tax collectors, gangsters, basically. And the way that conventional Christians get around that is they say, oh, no, you don't understand. Those weren't sins because he was God as he did them, and God can't sin. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, he was God, and the whole idea, the whole point of your religion is that he was also a human. And humans sin. Humans behave in ways that aren't in, perfect harmony with the highest good at all times from a certain vantage point. I mean, another way we totally do, but just, I'm just saying, the part of the new Aeon gospel that I have to offer to you is that Jesus was a real human who messed up and did real sins. Also, if he never sinned, why the fuck did he raise his hand for the baptism of John the Baptist? John the Baptist was baptizing people to forgive them and wash them of their sins. So why would he be interested in that if he was not a normal person? Anyways, so if you take this, so Carl Jung is saying, we can end this heresy of dualism, and we can actually work with the idea of the incarnation, take it very seriously, that a complete normal human was also totally the creator God at the same time. And that the creator God reconciled himself to himself, sacrificed himself to himself. And this becomes a very powerful idea. And this removes all the notions of, guilt and unworthiness from the idea of the crucifixion and the idea that Christ died for your sins, because really he didn't. Christ died for Christ's sins. Christ died for the Creator's sins. I can go on about this a bit more later, but let me try to get through the rest of this quote. Okay. That is the meaning of the divine service, of the service which man can render to God, that light may emerge from the darkness, that the Creator may become conscious of his creation, and man conscious of himself. By virtue of his reflective faculties, man is raised out of the animal world, and by his mind he demonstrates that nature has put a high premium precisely upon the development of consciousness. Through consciousness, he takes possession of nature by recognizing the existence of the world and thus, as it were, confirming the Creator. The world becomes the phenomenal world, for without conscious reflection, it would not be. So this is a very important point because, again, conventional Christianity speaks of God as if God consciously created everything, as if God was a person already who consciously, I mean, he was a person, but that's a deep, as if he were conscious of what he was doing. And Jung is saying, if the creator were conscious of himself, he would not need conscious creatures. And I think that's a really strong point, because in order to have a consciousness, you have to have an ego. You have to have a unified center of awareness around which, associations can grow. And schizophrenic people or severely psychopathic people don't have a unified center of consciousness. They have a fragmentary personality. And I think that's what we see in the Old Testament. We see a fragmentary personality. And when God incarnates as Jesus, Yod He Val He becomes Yod He Shin Ve He, Yeshua. He becomes conscious and he experiences all of the pain of his own creation, which again is the pain, all of the meanness and cruelty of humans. We are made in the image of God. We are reflections. We are microcosms of the macrocosm. So yes, we are also fragmentary personalities sometimes until we truly come to know ourselves. And then I put in brackets here that Jung goes on to give the teleological argument of evolution, similar to Desjardins. So the teleological argument of evolution is what I mentioned to you earlier at the start of this talk, which is that everything has already been redeemed. There's an alpha omega point that has already occurred. I am the end. I am the beginning and the end. And we have already evolved in nonlinear time completely to the complete fulfillment of everything. So anyways, Jung is agreeing with that. Jung says, I do not imagine that in my reflections on the meaning of man and his myth, I have uttered a final truth. But I think that this is what can be said in view of the coming Aeon of Aquarius, the water bearer, who has a human figure and is next to the sign of the fishes. This is a conjunctio oppositorum. Again, autocorrect wouldn't let me, right? Conjunctio oppositorum, composed of two fishes in reverse. The water bearer seems to represent the self. So this is a very deep, important idea. And let me take a breath here. The water bearer, Aquarius. Okay, so a human figure holding cup. So here's an image of the star. This is the card, the tarot card associated with Aquarius in the Thoth deck. And this is an image, me in mid-journey, made of Babalon riding the beast, holding the Holy Grail. And I'm just going to say Babalon is Aquarius. Babalon is the water bearer. She is the cup bearer. You know, the blood of Christ that she holds in her cup. She has a cup filled with the wine of her fornications, with the filthiness of her stuff, with abominations and the filthiness of her fornications, with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus, which, of course, Jesus was the first martyr of himself. So it's the blood of Jesus, it's the Eucharistic blood. She's holding this, and of course, the blood of Jesus is also the living water. So she is the water bearer, the bearer of the blood, the bearer of the wine. She is in, so this is obviously, this would be a very scandalous thought for conventional Christians, because Babalon is riding on this seven-headed beast, right? The seven-headed beast and her riding it is a tantric image of alchemical union. So Babalon in union with the beast, drunk on the blood, is a Christic image of the self, which is parallel to Buddhist tantric images of, you know, got a daddy Buddha and a mama Buddha in union, right? We also see that in plenty of Hindu imagery. It's the same thing, except this is in what Jung calls the mandala of Christ, which is the book of Revelation. It's a union of opposites, masculine and feminine, human and bestial, pagan and Judeo-Christian, right? Obviously, because Babalon is Babylon. She's, you know, associated with the pagan city of Babylon. Ishtar, Inanna is obviously, you know, Astarte, Aphrodite, all of these Queen of Heaven archetypes. But she's also wearing robes of scarlet and violet, and she's also, which were the colors of the veil of the temple in Jerusalem, the veil of Solomon's temple. So she's pagan, but she's also dressed up like Solomon's temple. She's also Jewish. And in fact, many Christian scholars, including my favorite, who's John Crowder, will talk about how Babylon is not really Babylon. In many ways, Babylon is Jerusalem. Babylon is representing the, you know, the whore in the sense of Jerusalem has whored itself out and tried to make itself worthy via the law rather than accepting grace. So that's sort of, how do I say, the metaphor at work, and there's many layers of metaphor here, but one talking about pouring oneself out, trying to get grace, it's like I have to work for it, right? Instead of just receiving love from a beloved, instead of just being beautifully supported by a truly loved person and being in sexual union with them. In the negative sense, you know, prostitution, one feels a sense of lack. One feels that one has to sell oneself, has to work for it, has to hustle on the street corner in order to get scraps of money, scraps of intimacy, scraps of something. So that's the negative sense there. And there's also a more glorious sense of the courtesan or the harlot archetype. But we don't have all day. So I'm trying to keep myself a little bit concise. But this is the task of humanity that Jung is pointing to, which is to gaze into the round cup of the Holy Grail and to see ourselves reflected there, to make the wholeness of God conscious. So, you know, Jung talks a lot about how wholeness is represented by a mandala, this round thing. And of course, the cup is round, and we're gazing into this round mirror. And I read that mirror quote before. Oh, All right, we've got a lot of bits to weave in. Here's a quote from the Book of the Law. Every man and every woman is a star. And I find this important to bring up because it's very true. And ourselves are solar selves, and the Christian myth is a solar myth. Um, Whoops, I was gonna do something there, but I didn't get time for it. Here's a quote. So, in a deep way, in a deep way that I don't think has been fully integrated or recognized either, because conventional Christianity will recognize the Judaic inheritance of Christianity, but it does very little to recognize the Orphic and Dionysian inheritance of Christianity, which I think is kind of obviously huge, right? Like, you know, who else was the living vine and the God of wonders? And, you know, who else did miracles with wine all the time? It was Dionysus, the god of the vine, who was also torn apart and reborn. And anyways, the Orphic mysteries were all about Dionysus. And here's a fun little quote from this was found on golden tablets that were buried with Orphic initiates. I am a child of earth and starry heaven. I thirst. Give to me to drink from the waters of memory. So there's something here. What we're doing is remembering ourselves as a child of earth and starry heaven, as both animal and angelic. And here's a beautiful picture of here's an angel carrying the Star of Bethlehem and the Magi coming to give gifts to the newborn baby Jesus. The association of the star and the divinity is very strong. So one of the oldest symbols in the world, which I neglected to get you a picture of, is called the dingir. And the dingir, you've probably seen it before. It's the star thing. And it was used in Babylon to denote divinity. So star meant divinity. um, and that's one of the oldest associations that humanity has. So we see the Star of Bethlehem associated with the birth of the Christ child. And basically, in this non-linear, supernatural way, there is a literal star that we are each related to. And really soaking in this grace, in this love, can bring to conscious attention your actual star self. And that's what the whole Western esoteric tradition is about. And again, I find it very interesting that Jesus's, you know, incarnation, life, and death was a very public example of what was in the heart of the mysteries, which were kept secret for thousands of years. Ye are gods. That's a fun quote from Jesus of Nazareth that also conventional Christians seem to never mention. They seem to just never bring that up. Well, I don't know why. But I believe that Jesus is pointing to the truth that we are all, he is a mirror of us. He came to be a revelation of what we are. We are that. We are that star. We are that divine child, that complete infinite innocence. Even when we mess up and we're rude to our moms and we don't look good on Instagram and, you know, all of our failures and everything, we are still that crowned and conquering child. And here's a fun quote. Oh, I didn't quite get into this, but this is from the serpent in Genesis, who said something very similar. He said, you know, eat of this fruit because your eyes will be opened and you will be like God. And there's this deep relationship, actually, that conventional Christians don't like to talk about between Jesus and the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And one of the main relationships there is that when Moses was in the desert with the Israelites were all getting bit by snakes and dying. And God said to Moses, take a serpent and put it up on a cross and hold it up to all of the people who are suffering from the snake bites. And whoever looks at the serpent on the cross will be healed and they won't die. And Moses did that, and the people were healed. And that, again, is the story of this mirroring, this deep mirroring. And Jesus specifically referred to himself that way. He said, just like the serpent in the wilderness had to be lifted up on a cross, so too must the Son of Man be lifted up. So there's this deep association with Jesus and the serpent and this mirroring. So this deep wisdom within us. Oh. Good. I made a slide about this. Becoming conscious of our inner star. So I'm just going to talk a little bit more, hopefully not too much longer. You all are very patient. Thank you for listening to me lay this all out. And I do want to have a conversation and I do want to meditate. So I'm going to try to get through this. Becoming conscious of our inner star. Star equals angel equals self equals sun. Obviously, stars and suns are the same thing. The sun is a star. Equals the crowned and conquering child. To gaze into the cup of the Holy Grail and realize our own self reflected in the mirror of its liquid is how we become conscious of our own inner star. The liquid of the Holy Grail is both the blood of Christ, the blood of God who incarnates and sacrifices God's self out of a loving wish for intimacy with God's own creation. And also, the Grail is full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornications. It is the sex magic elixir of Babylon's union with the beast, the child. The liquid of the Holy Grail is a heady brew of menstrual blood, beast sperm, and Eucharist blood. It is the mix of animal and God, sex and death, feminine and masculine, pain and pleasure, predator and prey, that make up the wholeness of God and the wholeness of our souls, which again is completely redeemed, blessed, and loved. And here's this is a traditional image, a Rosicrucian image of the pentagrammaton emerging out of the tetragrammaton. So we have the tetragrammaton of the name of Yahweh, which again I'm saying is basically nature, the unconscious process of creation. And then through the incarnation, through the miracle of the incarnation, this unconscious beast process blossoms as a rose and gains this fun letter shin. See, that's the letter shin for spirit. So it becomes Yod, Hey, Yod, Hey, Shin, Vau, Hey, Yeshua, the name of Jesus. And that's, well, that's the pentagrammaton. And that's and that's why we use pentagrams in our LBRP. Sorry, many of you, I forget, I'm talking to a lot of you have probably not done the LBRP. But anyways, and then we also have the letter Aleph is in the middle there. But let's just keep going, shall we? The healing mirror. Yes, yes, yes. We talked about this a bit. I'm just going to emphasize that we only become conscious of our larger self through a process of remembering, recognition, which our nighttime dreams can do for us and which our myths do for us. If we use our myths in the correct way, and the myths of Christianity have been badly abused for many years. The model of Christ, when met as a mirror and understood in a new Aeon context, helps make us conscious of our divine star selves. Here's this fun little picture of the Holy Family that I made. There's baby Jesus, there's Babalon, and there's the beast. Maybe many of you probably have questions, I imagine, as I continue to talk about this completely weird stuff. But I'm gonna, let's see, I have stuff here for our meditation. Maybe I'll just stop and answer questions for a bit before we go into our meditation. So let me take a look at the chat. Okay. Jean, I'm glad you are eating peppermint ice cream and singing along. Let's see. People are trying to tell me how to do full screen. Thank you for your kind help. Sorry for my limitations. Okay. Yes, there's the little ding here. Zoe showed it. Okay. Ignorance and innocence are actually complete synonyms, funnily enough, if you really think about it. One just has a negative connotation and one has a positive connotation. Let's see. Yes, Mary Kay, current problem of Christianity is cultural amnesia of the entire Hellenistic world. Yeah, this is a lot. Okay, so here's a question. Laura says, can we have regular sermons with you? This is stunning. I grew up loving Christ and then got Tantric Buddhism. This is just glorious. Laura, I do have an ambition to have a church of some kind. I'm just, keep giving me enthusiasm if you want that to happen, because obviously I'm a vampire and I feed on energy. So I feed on the blood of Christ, JK. But yes, thank you, Laura. Thank you for your enthusiasm. Yeah, I mean, I love talking about this stuff because this has been really healing my soul as this has come together in my realization. I've just felt this greater and greater uplifting. So I love it. Thank you for the enthusiasm, everybody. Yeah, maybe we can have monthly regular sermons with me because I sure have a lot to say about this. And it does seem like it's a whole new religion, doesn't it? Like, I mean, it's not completely new, obviously, but every religion worth its salt revises the stories of previous religion. Um, so Well, I love this excitement, everybody. You're making me so happy. Oh, Carolyn Sinsky is here. My dear other Carolyn. Hello. So wonderful. And Julia from Australia. Anyways, okay. Everybody's here. Yes, I'm definitely starting a religion. I mean, I'm not starting it. Obviously, the Lord started it. But it's like, uh, I think maybe a reformation, like when I think about Martin Luther nailing those theses to the door, I was like, let's have a new reformation. Why not? Um, Thank you, Imogene. Wow, 101 folks here as we're discussing the starting a church idea. That's amazing. Well, okay, if anybody has questions, let me know before we get into our meditation. And also, I could just enthuse a little bit about, having our new church, which is basically uh, that I do believe that when people, with the message of grace, comes a spontaneous alignment with one's true will. It comes a spontaneous alignment with genuine wholesomeness. And genuine wholesomeness is not fakey fake, Ned Flanders type niceness. Genuine wholesomeness is an inhabiting of wholeness, is, a deep awareness of one's capacity for evil and one's capacity for goodness and living holistically within the balance of that. Oh, okay. There's hands raised. Could actually, for the sake of time, everybody, would you mind typing your questions, please, into the chat? Because I think if I get started calling on people, that might.
I'm driving. I can't type.
Oh, Mihaela. Okay, all right. Then lay it on me, Mihaela. Go ahead.
Well, very quickly, thank you so much. I really love it. I wanted to start that church. I was already seeing myself in Romania preaching this new religion. And it is confusing because I'm a new person in today's the magic, the Babalon, all the names, all the information. But I love what you preach. It feels good. It makes sense. And I just wanted to say thank you and happy holidays.
Oh, thank you, Mihaela. Thank you. I love the idea of you preaching this in Romania. That gives me great joy.
I cannot wait to tell all the parents your kid is innocent. You are innocent. Everybody's innocent. Just make a mess if you have to make a mess. Learn your lessons, but you are innocent even when you make a mess.
Beautiful, dear. Beautiful. Thank you. So, Zoe says, do you think this idea of the hero's journey / its archetypes will somewhat dissolve in the Aeon of Horus since there is no journey of redemption through time to undertake? Zoe, great question. Yes, because ultimately, when we really reflect on this message of grace, that it's all already been accomplished, the finished work, it's all done. There's nothing, you don't have to do anything. When you really sink into it, in my sinking into it, what I've found is that it's actually very similar to Dzogchen, which is the great perfection in Tantric Buddhism. And it's like maybe just a little bit different in the sense that it's a bit more lovey-dovey, gooey, bhakti emphasis than Dzogchen. But will it dissolve since there's no journey of redemption? I mean, I think the myth will remain, the story of the incarnation and crucifixion and resurrection and Pentecost and everything, I think that will remain relevant as long as we continue to experience apparently linear time, which might not be for very much longer, y'all. I don't know. I've been reading, there's all these drone UFO things appearing everywhere, and I keep reading things about how the government actually potentially has teleportation technology and free energy. And if that's true, then it's probably game over for linear time pretty soon, actually. If we can all just teleport and time travel and have free energy. Anyways, things are going to get real weird. They're already getting weird. Terence McKenna said in like 2000, he was like, we're hurtling towards the singularity. Things are going to start getting weirder and weirder, and eventually people are going to have to talk about it. So we're talking about it now. And another fun thing about Babylon and about having an apocalyptic grace religion around Babylon is that Babylon does come with a revelation. She's a part of the revelation, is how Babylon transforms into the bride, the New Jerusalem. And I don't know how many of you are really familiar with the book of Revelation, but there's three feminine figures in the book of Revelation. There's a figure often called the Queen of Heaven, who's laboring, trying to give birth to a baby, and her baby is born, and then it's immediately eaten by the beast. And then the next feminine figure in Revelation we see is Babylon, who is riding the beast and drinking from the Holy Grail. And then the third feminine figure is the New Jerusalem itself, which is called the Bride of Christ, and isn't presented as a woman, but rather as a city. But still, it's the Bride of Christ. And there's this deep relationship between the mother, the whore, and the bride, in that they are all the same figure ultimately. And the realization of that, I guess, is part of the revelation of the great perfection that perhaps does, take us out of linear time and melts everything down. So, yeah, certainly. Okay, Danny has a question about a specific ritual that I gave in Red Magic, which, by the way, if you like this stuff, you would really like Red Magic, which is in the Red Work, which will open again in March. Which is a quote from The Cry of the 12th Aether, where Crowley is channeling Babylon. And I was going to read it to you when we get into our meditation anyway, so I will answer Danny's question about it now. So there's a quote, "And therefore she is passed from the assembly and the law and the enlightenment unto the anarchy of solitude and darkness. Forever thus must she veil the brilliance of herself." What is the assembly and the law in this line, Danny? Well, Danny, what is it? I mean, it's a lot of things. Sorry. All sacred literature to me has many, things don't, there's not a simple correspondence like this means that. It probably means a whole lot of things. One of the things that I imagine it means is the law, in the sense of the Torah, the Mosaic law, and also potentially, since it's Crowley, the Book of the Law. The assembly, I imagine, might refer to the conventional church and also just to groups and institutions in general. So she's passed, but it's also, I think it's referring to the tree of life. So she's passed from the assembly and the law and the enlightenment unto the anarchy of solitude and darkness. The anarchy of solitude and darkness sounds to me like Bina on the tree of life, which is the black Sephiroth, the supernal, which is associated with Babylon. And I'm just going to say that for now because I don't have time to explain the entire Kabbalah. Okay. Tail is making some, okay, right. The equation of Babylon with passion, the beast, the aggression, baby Jesus with ignorance or innocence. Those are definitely some associations you could make. Again, all symbols, especially symbols like these, are multivalent. They're not simple allegories. So generally these days when I think of Babylon, I think of the Holy Spirit. I think of the Shakti of God, that's what it's in Indian terms, the power the manifest force. I think of the beast as Yod He Vav He, again, which is the process of nature. So, yeah, I don't know. That seems pretty, I mean, for me, it seems pretty obvious that the process of nature could easily be called the beast, right? It's just this animalistic, it's happening. Um, the All-Father, Pan, Odin, those are other names for the beast, for Yod He Vav He. Emily, my question is, how do I get my conscious mind on board with the idea that an unconscious God created so much suffering in the world? I can tell you how I do it, which is I tell myself a little story, and actually I'm writing this story out for Red Magic, but here it goes. Once upon a time, God really wanted to create a world, but everything was too filled with God, so there was no room for a world. So God decided to fall asleep. And in falling asleep, God became unconscious. And there became room for a world. And so this world is God's dream. So necessarily, so how do I say this? There needs to be some sort of withdrawal of utter goodness. In the Kabbalah, it's called Zimzum, the withdrawal or the contraction of God, to make room for something apparently other to exist. And is it genuinely other? I don't know. I don't think so. Not from a certain perspective of consciousness, but certainly is very possible to feel alienated within the material world. Um, so even that possibility of alienation, one could call the origins of evil. Um, and so that unconsciousness, what's another way to say this? Um, so right, so the falling asleep. Let me read this question again. How do I get my conscious mind on board with the idea that an unconscious God, why wouldn't an unconscious, I mean, maybe let me put it another way, Emily, maybe you can dialogue with me. Why wouldn't an unconscious God create suffering? I mean, it just seems like suffering is deeply connected to unconsciousness and ignorance. Uh, the others, I mean, this is why most people, or lots of people these days, don't believe in God, because the world has suffering in it, right? So that's a great reason not to believe in God. How could there be an all good God when there's child trafficking? Lord God, it's terrible to think about. You know, it just makes you want to cry. There's war. There's all of these horrible, horrible crimes everywhere. Okay, what I'm saying is there's this zimzum of God into falling asleep, and then we have a mirroring of that. It's not that there's another emptying, which is God emptying God's self to come into incarnation. So if you think of like space and time as this somewhat flat disk, and then you think of the wholeness of God as this fun little crazy eight lemniscate, and it dips down into space and time right here, right at the incarnation of Jesus, right, little baby Jesus in Bethlehem. It makes this toroidal form. Um, and to me, it makes sense. Maybe it doesn't make sense to anybody else, but to me, it makes sense that in a way, God atoned for God's falling asleep and creating the world of duality. So then how do I say this in another way? I don't think that it's possible for the world to exist completely without evil. In any, hold on one second. Oh my gosh, Pam, I have to pick up. I thought, okay, calm down, Pam, calm down. It's okay. I realized that my husband is on a trip, so I actually have to pick up my daughter right now. And I messed up. So everybody, we will not have time to meditate together today, but maybe we'll have another session where we will meditate. But what I invite you to do is to simply soak in the awareness of God and joy and grace, and I will email out this this presentation and the PDF of the slides, and maybe we'll just have another time just for meditation. I'm so sorry that I'm so forgetful. I'm drunk on the blood. That's what's happened to me. But I'm going to go pick up my daughter from school. And I love you all very much. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Jesus loves you. All is well. Babylon loves you. Everything is happy. Mwah! Merry Christmas, everyone.